Welcome to Wiki Bearings, where we dive into the worlds of engineering excellence, from the automotive marvels to the industrial giants. Join us to explore the wonders that keeps the world in motion. My name is Hassanein Alwan, and I'm your host. Welcome to another episode of Wiki Bearing. In this episode, we're going to talk about the automotive market, the automotive aftermarket. And with me, I have a special guest, Michael Dehn. He's the Automechanika Director for Johannesburg. He has been in the industry for more than 20 years. He made an impact from India to Dubai, Frankfurt to Johannesburg. He has led one of the most iconic exhibitions in the industry, like Beauty World, Automechanika Dubai, and now he is leading Automechanika Johannesburg. Michael Dehn, it's lovely to have you. Thank you for coming. It's what a place that we are in Johannesburg, in the center, in the south center of Africa.
Yeah, that's really cool. Especially seeing you here after I've seen you so many times in Dubai at the exhibitions and even outside of it. So it's really nice to see you here in my new home market. Just a little extra information. So we're running here not only Automechanika, but we have 7 other exhibitions as well.
Okay, yeah. So you are the director for Messe Frankfurt in South Africa?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. The last time we met, we were in Frankfurt. We had a lovely meeting there. Thank you for showing me around. Frankfurt is where the whole thing started. I want to know a little bit about your journey throughout. I know you have been for a long time with Messe Frankfurt. Tell us about your journey.
So probably my first exposure to Messe Frankfurt was as a little child. My parents were visiting friends that were exhibiting at a show, and they took me along, and I have fond memories of that.
That was 2 years ago?
That was, that was in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And from then onwards, of course, every 2 years, I was very, very excited to attend the Frankfurt Motor Show.
Okay.
At the time, it was just, one of the biggest events in automotive worldwide.
Yes.
And one nice little gimmick there, they were giving you pins from the car manufacturers.
Oh, nice.
And as a little boy, you would have much better chances of collecting those pins from the ladies on the stand than if you're a bit more grown up. So yeah. I always had
the charm.
I got a lot of those pins, and in school we would trade them. And, I think in that time I got a fascination for exhibitions in general. And I saw Messe Frankfurt as a gate to the world.
Mm. You have now been in South Africa for?
Pretty much 3 years now.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So let us talk about the automotive market. Now, the southern part of Africa is a growing market. It's expected to be 12 million cars. How can you describe us how do you see the automotive market in the southern sphere, in the southern side of Africa?
So in the southern African countries, I would actually say by now we are probably even have surpassed 12. We are probably more nearing 16 million cars. So okay. If you add all these markets, obviously not very exact, but approaching that number. Mm. So these markets are all quite different. So South Africa is the most advanced automotive market.
The biggest, probably.
It's the biggest in Southern Africa, but also across Africa in terms of manufacturing. And the big difference in South Africa is that we have 7 manufacturing OEMs, and the remaining ones are importing, right? So that already is a big separation between the brands here, and they manufacture both for the local market as well as for the export market. Then we have other countries around Southern Africa that have are much smaller volumes, and some of them don't really have a new car market at all. They import everything used, and obviously that is a completely different setup. Yeah.
So if we look at the automotive market, it's expected to grow. I think now it's around 20 billion. It's expected to grow to 26 billion by 2029. What do you think is the driver behind this growth?
So there are some undeniable facts that you can just extrapolate into the future, and these are the population growth, urbanization. These things are definitely happening. And then there are, of course, some variable factors such as government policies and maybe also change in customer behavior. But additional to that, we're experiencing quite an interesting new phase of stability in South Africa. The new government has implemented a lot of policies, and we can see a much increased confidence into the market. So that is definitely driving the growth. In fact, South Africa is projected to be part of the fastest growing countries in the next 10 years.
Oh, wow.
With an annual projected growth of about 2.9%.
Nice.
And that's worldwide amongst the top 10 countries. So all of that contributes to those numbers, and it looks good from today's point of view.
Nice. If we look at, when we talk about the automotive market, it's automatically impacting the automotive aftermarket. And we have seen the rise of new distributors, wholesalers. And so how do you look at this, and what describes that market?
I think from a South African perspective, and that's not only in the automotive aftermarket or in the automotive market, we have a lot of highly professional private sector companies in South Africa. And their influence goes far beyond South Africa. They expand into Southern African countries, especially the neighboring countries.
Definitely.
So it's the same in the aftermarket. There are a number of companies that have branch offices in all the surrounding markets, and they cater to those markets. And that is a trend that has been going on for a while, but it's getting bigger, and these companies are reaching even further into Africa. Of course, they want to expand as well. And from a South African base, that's a very good base to do that from.
I think it's becoming very normal for South African companies to approach their businesses to the neighboring country. I think the ease of now with the growth of the logistic solutions, it's easier to export. It's easier for them to visit, and I think it's becoming much more connected if you compare 10, 20 years ago. The stability of these countries is also contributing that the trade between these countries are also becoming much more acceptable, much more facilitated, easier, and so on, definitely.
There is a new factor, which is, if you consider the size of it, the AFC-FTA Free Trade Agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, is a fairly young agreement that has only been really put in place in the last 2-3 years with actual shipments. It has been in preparation for a long time. But that is also a game changer. And when you hear His Excellency Wamkele Mene speak about the introduction of the process, he also mentioned that the expectation of how to get all the signatories into this agreement, the expectation was that will take 10, 20 years. The reality is that was quite fast. It took much less than 10 years. I think within 5 years they had pretty much everybody signed up. And so that is a game changer as well for intra-African trade.
Okay. And do you see this would have a great impact on the inter-Africa?
Yes.
Is it really practically easier today to do business between these countries?
Easier, yes. Is it easy? Probably not yet. And it always depends who the countries are that are trading. But it certainly is becoming easier. And as I said, that free trade agreement is progressing much faster than anybody would have expected. And so you can probably see that every country can see that it's to their benefit to join that agreement because they will benefit from the intra-African trade.
You know, when we look at the automotive market or the automotive aftermarket, or in general, South Africa is the biggest market in many sectors. But I think if you look at the neighboring countries, they are much smaller nations and countries, and which will bring both challenges and opportunities in that market. How do you see that companies that is looking to approach the southern part of Africa can get advantage on these opportunities?
Yeah, indeed. So there are there are challenges. To give you an example from a car manufacturer's perspective, some countries don't justify the volumes to even open up a dealership or to be represented directly. So in some countries, the car manufacturers are not directly there, and hence also the strong reliance on imported vehicles. The challenge on that, of course, is, I mean, you're from Dubai, you know how the export of used cars to Africa is always a challenging project, and the challenge for those countries is that the quality of those cars is not always obviously standardized, and it poses a challenge for the receiving country because some of those cars are not even roadworthy. So on the other hand, for the aftermarket, that's also a big opportunity because that car, once it's sold, it's immediately a potential customer. Yeah, you might immediately need to change the tires. You might immediately change the batteries or other parts, right? So from the aftermarket perspective, it's an opportunity to have an older vehicle fleet across the country. And also sometimes volume, the smaller volume is an opportunity for a smaller company to take something that a bigger company might not want to look at.
Yeah,
right? And then another interesting aspect that I've noticed on our recent roadshow is we visited 6 countries directly and one additional one indirectly.
Okay.
And I could see the adoption of electric vehicles was quite different. In some countries you see it's very, very present, and in other countries it's not available at all. And the interesting thing here is that I visited Rwanda, which is quite a small country, and in Kigali you see electric vehicles all around, from the delivery bike up to the electric bus. And so the smaller size is there an opportunity because you don't cover big distances, you don't have to worry about a huge network of charging stations. There it is really possible to introduce something and roll it out. So there the smaller size is maybe an opportunity. So that's how you see the differences across Africa.
You're mentioning Kigali. It was, for me, very interesting to see BYD charging stations in different areas. And then, I actually, the first time I saw a charging station, I took a photo of it because for me was this is not the first thing you expect from a small nation, a small country like Rwanda. I think, as you said, the Africa is not one size fit all. It's very different from one country to another. I think it's very challenging. I was very surprised that, especially when I was there, I spent quite some time to understand the market, and I saw many big players that's not, as you said, not presented by themselves. And I was surprised that few dealership would have not one, not two, not 3 brands, but they present 5, 6, 7 brands, which in other developed markets, if you are a distributor for Toyota, so you're Toyota only. If you are Mercedes, you're Mercedes only. Yeah. But I was surprised in some of Africa, you would have one distributor or automotive distributor that would have 5, 6, 7 brands under their portfolio, from the luxury to the mid to the electrical and so on. And it was a very different model than what we used to see in the Middle East, for example, in
Of course,
Dubai.
yeah.
In Dubai, you would have, for the same dealer, maybe 2 different companies because of the size of the business.
And
So-
exclusive dealerships,
Yeah, and
which you don't always have in other markets. Right?
yes. So it is so different, and I think uh, uh, when we look at it, I don't think many companies understand the individuality of these different markets. They're serving both opportunities, but they are also challenging for
course,
many
yeah.
of them. When looking in general in Africa, especially in this, let's call it in South Africa, as an automotive market, we see that the financing of cars, the availability of financing is maybe limited to 20%, take or leave. And it's not the same way as it, for example, in Germany or in some other well-developed market.
Correct.
How do you see this process a challenge or an opportunity in this way?
So here I can only speak for South Africa because
Yeah.
I haven't experienced anything else. But as I already mentioned, private sector companies in South Africa are extremely professional. And I would have to say the banks are not only very professional, but also very innovative here.
Okay.
That's the one side. The other side is that they're also very invasive in terms of data. And so if you go for car finance, the bank would know every last thing about you
Okay.
without you ever giving them that information. They would know if you have a house. They would know what insurance you have. They would know everything about you. They would know if you pay your phone bill. So their information, their access to information is absolutely astonishing.
Okay.
So, and another thing that I noticed is when you do go for car finance, the interest rate you pay depends very, very much on the, let's say, accumulation of all of that information. And the difference between interest rates here to consumers could vary by up to 4%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So if you are higher risk clients, you pay 4% more interest rate.
Okay.
Right? And so, but what you said is correct. The availability of car finance is only for a certain percentage of the population. And of course, that plays into the used car market. We have some very, very large used car dealers here, platforms online, as well as physical dealerships. So the ones that only broker between buyer and seller, and the ones that actually buy the cars and put them up in a showroom. That is a very, very big market. And then, of course, also a big opportunity for the aftermarket again.
Interesting you're mentioning about the used cars. And I think we cannot deny that Africa is depending on used. I read in a recent report 85% of all imported cars into Africa are used cars. And this can be a major opportunity for aftermarket. Do you think it's an opportunity, or is it more of a challenge?
It's definitely both. By the way, that number 85%, that it is so different in every country.
Yes,
you
yes,
have countries that near almost 100%, and you have countries where that number is lower. So again,
it's not like
completely.
It's very different.
It's very, very different from country to country. Having spoken to a lot of policymakers, it is a big challenge because a lot of countries dump their junk cars into Africa, and African countries are since many years taking measures to push back because they're saying quite rightly that we want to make sure that the cars that arrive in our harbors are of a certain standard. They're roadworthy at least, right?
Yes, yes.
Actually, I remember probably 10, 12 years ago in Dubai, there was an agreement between Kenya and Dubai signed to have the inspection in Dubai before the export. And I think that was done through a Japanese vehicle inspection service. That was also in Dubai at the time. I don't know what happened to it, but these are certainly initiatives that help African countries control the quality of cars and bring in some certain standard of cars. coming back to your question, of course, it is also an opportunity, especially when we talk about the aftermarket. As that car is right from day one
needs service.
It needs service, and it's not bound to any service agreements or anything, or with a OEM initially, and if done well, this is an opportunity, and also if the quality of the car is good, then I don't see also a major issue with that.
I've recently read there are certain countries that are taking measures to, as you said, to at least to make the car reduce the age of the car. So they're putting. I think there is policies coming on. There is lots of discussion between to have more of a standard policy, because actually, if one country can import, then this moves to another country. So I think there is a lots of discussion on policymakers to put a certain standardization on this, and I think it's driving that to a more safer car import, and the car are more worthy for. But in general, it's also brings an opportunity for aftermarket, especially the independent aftermarket, and this must benefit a lot of the spare part companies, the spare part OEMs, the dealers, and so on. You have been here now almost 3 years, and you leading the Automechanika Johannesburg. Do you see that also plays a role in the momentum?
Yeah, I mean, I think that has always played a big role, and it is definitely still a very, very big part of that. But a big part of the momentum is also that with the population growth does come additional wealth into a growing middle class in Africa. And even though not everybody might have access to finance, but it does definitely uplift the market. And then everybody benefits from that, for sure. On the other hand, when there is a market that is dominated by used car imports, like where you're nearing 100%, I know that car manufacturers also don't see really a way to enter that market, because they're competing not against other car manufacturers, they're competing with their new cars with other used cars. And that makes it nearly impossible to enter the market in sufficient numbers, because you cannot compete against used cars.
What we said is very interesting, because we meet OEMs and car manufacturers, and sometimes in certain markets that they are mostly depending on used car, they find it very challenging, and the feasibility, I've done that more than one time. And I've seen, not to mention names, but I've seen manufacturers that withdrawn after 4 or 5 years into the market, saying, okay, we can't do this market because it doesn't make sense. I've seen major car manufacturer that is not even selling 10 cars a year. Even they're established, but again, the gap between a used car and a new car is so big that there is no comparison. And then financing this car is also not very easy. It's not accessible to everyone. So we see that there is a major challenge. We have seen certain markets developing a niche market into rent it to own it. We have seen. They're finding new models. I think some of the new manufacturers, some of the Chinese car manufacturers, they are finding their way into not through the traditional financing, but the microfinancing, sharing models, and so on. And I think it is interesting how this is going to evolve.
Well, I can say that from the bank side. So one of our partners in one of our events is Westbank. And I know that they are looking into many different ways of ownership and subscription models and all of that. And that is definitely the new reality. The traditional car ownership, I buy a car and I own it until I sell it, I think is on the decline in favor of other ways of ownership.
True.
And also the other question is that I hear a lot is, does my car really have to stand still in the garage overnight, or is there somebody that might want to use it in that time? So I think all those, the digitization and the smart car combined with a smartphone, it opens up all these doors, and that in change makes it a lot more affordable for somebody to at least own the car partially or at certain times of the day, right? And so all of that is going to happen, and I don't see why it shouldn't happen very, very soon.
I think also the younger generation doesn't look at the car the same way we used to look at a car.
That's true, yeah.
You know, when we were, even before 18, the first thing we wanted to do is getting a driving license. The second thing on the list is to own a car.
Exactly.
And the car was, looked at as a prestige. It was fun
Freedom.
to own. It's freedom. It was a milestone that owning a car, and I think the younger generation doesn't look at it the same way. It's looking at it as a way of transportation, and this is why it's changing with time.
So let me tell you, I've seen that, but not here. I've seen it in Germany.
Okay.
So I've seen it in relatives and their kids or friends and their kids. I've seen that even the driving license isn't a priority at all. Then a car ownership is also not a priority. But of course, there you have wonderful public transport. People love using their bicycles whenever they can. And that is absolutely a trend in Germany or maybe even in Europe. But I have not come across that here.
Not yet.
But no. Including that public transport is also not such a viable option, especially not in Johannesburg. So it still is a priority.
And I think between this extreme to owning a full car with the cost of it, I think what we see is evolving in this shared mobility, and it's becoming more, and micro mobility is also getting traction. I don't need to own a big car. I can have a smaller car. I can take a scooter, or I can take I've seen the very smaller type of vehicle, so part of the micro mobility. And with micro mobility, it's easier to charge them. So I think we're seeing the trends in there. Maybe it's not yet fully developed, but I think this is how the market is moving.
Well, if I think back, it's really, I forgot about it for a while, but with this discussion here, I remember it now again, that my first car sharing subscription was 25 years ago in Frankfurt.
Okay.
And at the time, I had a brief period where I didn't have a car, and there was no smartphone, obviously. So you had to send an SMS to a number. Then you would get a code in response. The car was parked in a certain location, and there was a little locker box, which the code would open that box, and the key was inside. So, and then you could park it at a specific other parking. And so those concepts are around for a long time, but of course smartphones and smart cars make them much, much more accessible. And there's so many options now available in Dubai also. Yes. And yeah, so.
I mean, the extreme example I've seen on this shared cars was when I was the last time in the US. So I have a friend that lives in the US. He's young, working for Apple. So I phoned him. I said, I have the weekend. I want to rent maybe an American muscle, just over the weekend. It's fun to be. He said, rent? Why would you rent? What do I do? And then he sent me an app. And the app, so we have seen many shared mobility models and so on, but this app, actually, you download this app, they would ask you for a driving license, credit card, whatever. And then you look at the neighborhood and then you see other people owning cars. Just other people, it's normal people owning cars, and then you can look at the list of, okay, this guy have a Mustang, the other have a Lamborghini, and they put it on the app. And this is not, it's P2P, like, yeah. And I did not believe initially in it, like, will it work? And how does it work? What is the key? What if, does it have petrol? Doesn't, what do I, it was initially very interesting. So I said, let's test this. And then I looked at the map. There was like 10 minutes working distance, a car park there. And you see like, okay, I want to take it for 2 days or 1 day. Actually, initially I wanted it for 3 days, but I said, I'll take it 1 day, try another car later. And it was very, very easy. Once you book the car, and once your phone comes close to the car, you can unlock the car. And then the keys is inside. You take the key, boom, you are on the go.
Yeah.
And after we finished, it will give you some suggestions. The owner would have suggested certain location of parking the car. You park the car, you lock the car, it's done.
Finish. Okay.
And it was for me very new. He said, I've never rented a car, I never own a car. And this is always, I pick a car, and this is why always with a different car. And this is how lots of this enablement of 5G, connected cars, digitalization have made this much, much easier. And this is why I think, of course, US is the forefront of this technology, but I don't see a hinder that this is coming in the coming years.
Not at all. Maybe that model won't come here for some time, but
not yet.
In all of these new ways of owning cars, they don't need a big infrastructure. So it's normally, when you talk about 5G internet or whatever, that needs big infrastructure. But those things, they can be implemented immediately, right?
Yes, exactly.
Just needs the right consumer to be open for that.
When we look at Africa in general, it's very depending on what we call the internal combustion engine, the ICE engines. It's we know that generally it's growing 20% year on year, but still it's less than 1% in general. What do you see is the main challenge adopting electrical car?
You mean the electric vehicles?
Yes.
So when you look at the numbers in South Africa, they are let me split between purely electric vehicles and the hybrids, because the hybrids have been actually developing much better.
Much faster, yes.
Yeah, so there we are about, I think we'll reach 10,000 units soon per year. But the purely electric vehicles, they have been doubling every year, but the total number is still in the low thousands.
Yeah.
So I think 2,000-3,000. And the reason for that is that for the last 12, 14 years, electricity supply was very unstable in South Africa. Not anymore for 6 months now. We haven't had any power cuts for 6 months, which is
nice.
It's nice. It seems that this period of unreliable electricity is finally over. But of course, in the minds of people, that sits very deep, right? And so people expect that if they want to own an electric vehicle, a purely electric vehicle, they would also have to have solar panels. So now, and the electric vehicle itself is more expensive. You pay a premium for that. You have to have a charging station. Now you think you have to have solar panels. That's another massive premium that you pay. So it's basically not an option. And so you're targeting with that the top 1% who can afford solar panels, charging station, and who probably would only use this as a second or third car.
Okay.
Right. And that's what you're seeing here. If electrical supply becomes much more reliable and so on, maybe that will change. But actually owning a purely electric vehicle is not so bad in South Africa, because I recently heard that the ratio of electric vehicles to charging station is 7-1, which is
really good.
Phenomenal ratio.
Yes.
So you are alone here pretty much when you own one, And the coverage seems to be also pretty good because just last month there was a group of journalists that went on a 1,400-kilometer ride from Joburg
wow.
to Cape Town,
Okay.
the classic route, right?
Yes, yes.
And they all arrived, and I just spoke
With
to
a
one
purely
of them,
electrical car.
purely electrical, and just spoke to one of them, and he said, yeah, it was fine, yeah. So
So at least there is no, let's say, there is no traffic on
on the
charging
stations,
stations.
no. So, and I see them frequently also, and so from that point of view, South Africa is ready for more. But it's just the economic and the infrastructural realities in terms of power supply and of course expense that I think is holding this back still. But the hybrids seem to be really moving.
We have done a study, I think it was 3 years ago, in general, we are in this industry and we want to see what could be the next move into the industry. And actually, when we looked at the global market, was very different than when we looked at Middle East and Africa. And when we did the simulation, it was one of our consultants, which is very knowledgeable about the market trends in EV, and we found that the Middle East and Africa, now the Middle East have a different reason because petrol cost is cheaper. There is not so much of financial incentives to own an electrical car. Here a bit more is the infrastructure challenges and electricity availability. So we reached to see that the name of the game of the coming 10 years in Middle East and Africa would be first hybrid cars, then plug-in hybrids, before we come to the boom in the EV, if it's ever become something.
Yeah.
And this is and when we started this study, which was in 2020, and it was a little bit disrupted by but we had a little bit more time to do online discussion. Initially, did not really make sense to me. Initially, like, we don't see any hybrid cars really, and because they are more expensive than a normal car, but very soon, we saw a boom, at least in Dubai now. Almost all our taxi are hybrid cars.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
that is a little bit also steered by
the incentivization,
by
government
the
policies.
government policies, and Dubai was always at the forefront of wanting to try the new things. I think the biggest Tesla fleet was always in Dubai, the taxi fleet and so on, and they wanted to be at the forefront. I remember that because more than 10 years ago, RTA asked us to help them organize a conference to make sure that the battery manufacturers keep the heat in mind when they develop their batteries. Right? And so they were always thinking very much ahead to say that, we want to be part of this technological revolution. Yeah.
This I think yes, of course, Dubai is always leading, but we now see that hybrid is becoming much more accessible, easier. They are not anymore as expensive as it used to be because it becomes more mainstream. So we see the difference between a hybrid car and a normal car, or an fully ICE engine is not that big difference. And what you save in running cost is actually compensated. So now we see that in the Middle East and Africa, the hybrid is getting the most of the traction. Working in this region, and I have been here now for almost a week and discussing with different companies, manufacturers, suppliers, OEMs, customers. Logistic seems to be a challenge for almost everyone in the room. And we look at shipping or logistic in general is becoming, sometimes a bottleneck. It takes 3 months, sometimes more, to get a product or parts from wherever is it, if it's from Germany or Japan or Dubai, or maybe Dubai is a little bit shorter, but it's becoming a challenge. How do you see we can work on this?
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few challenges. Port congestions, cross-border problems, strikes, infrastructure failures, whatever. So nothing new, but they do affect sometimes the accessibility. Since they are really real physical problems, they also offer, on the other hand, every problem offers an opportunity. They also offer a lot of opportunity for people who have availability in their stock and so on. So that is always the thing here, that you can see sometimes price fluctuations because something's not available, but somebody's got something in stock. I mean, the solution is twofold, I would say. One is the very simple, straightforward, not simple, but straightforward improvement of the infrastructure. And there are many projects on the way, such as the North-South corridor that they're working on since 15 years. That is a massive project that connects Africa right through from north to south. And it goes through so many countries. So, of course, you can expect that somewhere it goes a bit faster than elsewhere, and,
obviously,
as it goes, right? There are many railway projects. And, these things, they take their time, but when they are implemented, then they also solve a lot of problems. On the other hand, I always hear a lot since I'm here that we need to solve this maybe a different way, an African way. And funny enough, we have a little exhibition here that's called Aero South Africa that deals with general aviation. So airplanes and helicopters and so on, but smaller ones, like the business jets. And there's an absolutely phenomenal network of small airports across the country. So and across Africa as well. And sometimes those things need to be considered as well. If something is urgent and maybe not so big, then let's see if that's an option. And so there are alternatives that you would probably not think of in another country. You would say, no, that's definitely not an option. It's too expensive or whatever. But you need to think and approach problems differently as well.
It's interesting what you said, because we see, like, for our business, that air shipment into Africa, especially certain countries, is so we sometimes so we have different logistics partners that we partner up with, and so we know, for example, into our Moroccan office, we sometimes have a challenge because now looking at the disruption into shipping and the Red Sea and so on. So we have discussed with one of our logistic partners to call it maybe air bridge or something. And what we have, trying to solve a problem, because normally it would take 35 days to ship from maybe Dubai to Morocco, 30 days. But now going all the way, it's taking sometimes 2 to 3 months. And we had to reinvent, and discuss. And now we have found a way to have a fixed number of kilograms, which is, I think now 30 or 40, which goes every 2 or 3 days. We negotiated with the major logistic company into air freight, and we got a very different model. I mean, it was to develop a model which is they come up with a fixed box, because here we have weight, we have volumes. If we're gonna keep measuring it every time, it's complicated for them. So now we have defined a fixed size of a box that we put what we want every 2 or 3 days, and it gets picked up, delivered there 2 or 3 days later, becomes very competitive, and solves many of these. And sometimes, let's say we have 60 kg to ship. Sometimes we do it over 2 days, rather. So 30 days today, and tomorrow another 30 days. And This is how you try to find a solution to something like this. Yesterday we were in a meeting, and they requested something similar, and I see like, and yes, it's more expensive, but I think if you work with the courier company, and the logistic is now way developed compared to 20 years ago. Both into the countries in Africa, the airports are in a different level, and we started to see this request of an air freight solution, and actually it's a growing. Many times we see Africa as leapfrogging, moving from. If you look at the landline was not adapted as much as if you look at Europe and we had the landline and then with the mobile phone and then the internet, where here they moved from no phone to
of course.
And now we see sometimes it's happening also on logistics, moving in a much more faster pace and leapfrog from just a traditional shipment to air shipment. You see, this is happening. There is a demand on this.
I don't have enough insights into actual shipments and so on, but it at the end of the day, sometimes you need to fix an issue, right? And if the road is not the way to go, then you have to find an alternative. And what you said about taking the shipment on the plane, it doesn't even have to be that the plane is flying just for that smaller one. But if they have some space, and that's what the logistics companies, they're very good at exactly. Last minute, I still have some capacity here to broker that and to sell it to the one who needs it right now. There's always a way to do that. When I was still in Dubai, I asked one of my partners what was the most favorite airline from Kenya to Dubai? What was the most used airline? And he said it keeps changing. And I said, how can they keep changing? He said it depends who offers the most luggage allowance at the moment.
Really?
Some allow 25 kilo, but some allow 40 kilo and some allow 60 kilo. So it keeps changing just based on that. And I thought that was a fascinating way of looking at things.
Okay, yes. I wouldn't think about that.
Exactly, right? And
luggage allowance can give new opportunity for.
Well, exactly. If you have 60 kilo luggage allowance, you can think of bringing some products with you that you normally have to send through a shipment. So I thought that was a interesting preview of what what Africa is about.
Yeah, true.
It's a very practical thinking, and
this is why I say people are very innovative in finding solution to their problems, and they always find a way to solve a problem that takes years to solve. This is the, let's say, African way of solving problems.
And in South Africa they say we make a plan. Let's make a plan, and that's what I've heard pretty much from the day I arrived here. When there was a problem, and it's not like, oh my God, we have a problem. It's like, okay, let's make a plan. It's looking ahead and looking for the solution and not too much worrying about the problem. And that is a big difference to many other places.
True. Looking at the global market, doing business online have been almost the trend with Amazon and all of these bigger platforms. In Europe now, there is a major online spare part companies that are really doing massive business. Do you see that this adaptation of buying online is changing the way business is done in Africa?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And I was earlier mentioning the private sector, and I feel they're quite advanced also on the digital side. If I tell you my local banking app I haven't seen that before anywhere else.
Okay.
So what I can do on my banking app here surpasses everything I've seen before in very developed countries. So very digitally savvy, digitally advanced, and BMW has one of their global IT centers here with, I think, 3,000 employees. So, yeah, that also speaks volumes. And interesting fact here that a company that you would absolutely need before you start thinking about e-commerce is somebody like Tech Alliance, because they offer you the backbone. They offer you the data catalog. They have all the part numbers and descriptions and everything. And they opened an office here, I think, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that is a clear indication that is moving. And I've just spoken to them a few days ago, and they're doing well and expanding here. So to answer your question, yes, definitely, e-commerce is moving, and I don't see it stopping.
I think when you see data companies entering a market, then you can definitely see that the demand on digitalization and
Yes.
e-commerce is.
Yeah.
And I think the right way, we need data. And as you mentioned, Tech Alliance is good in there, especially they are specialized in the automotive aftermarket
Yes.
data. And it is, I think, looking at data in general, you mentioned something, and I was very surprised. I had a meeting with one of the banks yesterday, and I was really impressed. Now, you mentioned that as well. You had a similar. I was really impressed how much data they have on different companies.
Mm-hmm.
Even in some modern country, we do not have. And I was discussing yesterday with one of the banks, and I was surprised how confident they are also on their data.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not because we struggle of having clean data, good data.
Yes.
I don't know how they do it, but I was very impressed with the amount of the data they have. On my side was on companies, but you were saying also on people.
Yes. No, they have some data accumulators here in the background that are supplying highly sophisticated data on many different things, on consumer level, but also on company level and on trends, it's very, very impressive.
And I think this would drive, because data is when we look at digital transformation, AI, all is database. So I feel that there is a new gold mine to dig into the African data. So I was pleasantly impressed by their data, their digital. They're very digitally savvy. They knew what they are talking about. And
another aspect that I am very impressed with is not only the data they have, but also the integrations that they managed to achieve between different companies. Now I'm going back to my banking app, how my insurance, which is a separate company, how my insurance is integrated in that, and how other companies are integrated into my banking app, even retailers and so on. So the retailer can push a certain promotion into my banking app that I get a certain discount through my banking app on their website and all of that, and through the payment providers and so on. And that actually all works. It's not only there, but it actually also works. And knowing how difficult it is to integrate just two companies with each other, but here it's like 20 companies that are integrated there, or even more, and it all seems to be working. Through my banking app, I can book discounted airline tickets and stuff like that, which is very specific to my profile, and it is really impressive.
And I think this is what was gonna really be advantages for companies that is willing to want to adapt in this part of the world.
Yeah.
Another aspect when we look at a typical or doing business in Africa, affordabilities have been a key. Some studies says that around 60% would value price over quality. I don't know if you agree on this or you don't agree on this, and this also puts some supplier into a challenge. How do you see that they can adapt to this?
Well, right now, especially the last 2 years, when I talk about the new car market, right? We all know that there's a big shift happening, and when we look at the pricing strategies, especially from the newcomers, how low they go into the market. So the consumer actually right now is in a phenomenal position because the consumer can choose great value at rather low prices. But I've also seen what happens next, right? So when we look at, let's say, a Chinese brand that entered a few years ago, one of the first movers, they entered at a certain price point. Let's call it 300,000 Rand or 150,000, $15,000, right? Okay. And they stayed on that level for about 2-3 years, and then they hiked up their price to 500,000. Oh, wow. Right? So you could clearly see that was a market entry strategy, and then the price went up tremendously. So I think that's a bit of a short-term effect right now, where some consumers have an opportunity that they will not get again. But I wonder if that is at the expense of when you do have a problem and their service network is not fully established, then maybe, your problem doesn't get sorted out that quickly or at all, maybe. So I'm sure there's always a trade-off, and when you trust a new brand, that brand also has to prove that they are actually fully ready and they can
deliver their promises.
They can fulfill their service promise as well. Yes, a new car is not supposed to break down at all, so maybe 2-3 years you have peace of mind. But at the end of the day, consumers also have to choose between good deals and maybe also peace of mind, because peace of mind is also a value, right?
Definitely.
And if you can't use your car for a few days or even weeks because the service can't be sorted out, then you also have a problem, and it's going to cost you money some way or the other.
Backfire.
So, yes. I don't know if you're referring to new cars or maybe also parts or whatever.
Both.
But what I see is that in South Africa there is definitely the different price levels. Also in the aftermarket, there's also good value options by suppliers here that provide very good service as well. And the core of the issue, I believe, is that not only South Africa but also many other African countries, they simply have a very big disparity between, let's say, the average buying power, purchasing power in other countries. I cannot compare that to Dubai because it's astronomical over there. And the car manufacturers do, to a certain extent, adapt to that. But of course, you can only adapt to a certain extent. You cannot,
definitely
cut your prices enough. It's not possible. But they do adapt to local pricing as much as they can. And wherever that is not enough, of course, they are suffering then with lower sales. On the other hand, where I feel there is still a very high willingness to pay very high prices is on the commercial vehicle aftermarket, right? Because it's a very simple calculation. The cost of a breakdown in between Botswana and Namibia is astronomical. The truck is standing there, and the cost of getting a replacement part over there is much higher than buying a good part in the first place. So I think many of the operators in that area, they always go for quality, and because reliability is their main USP, and because they know it's costing them a lot of money if their truck breaks down.
So you see there is more opportunity in the commercial segment, especially in the aftermarket.
Well,
Maybe
if you are offering quality, reliability, then there is certainly a higher willingness to pay for it. Yeah.
Now, if we look at some studies say in 2050, Africa would be double in terms of population. So we have the boom of demography. Now, how do you see this would affect the automotive market and the automotive aftermarket?
Well, I think I touched on it already when we talked about the growth in the market value by 2029. Of course, that is one of the undeniable facts of simple extrapolation. You see the population growth and it won't suddenly stop. So it all depends on under which circumstances that growth happens. Like, is the growth of the income going alongside or even faster than that, which would mean that we are growing a very good middle class that can afford to drive cars and things. So if that's the case, obviously that tremendously impacts the market conditions and goes hand in hand with the development of infrastructure and and we see that in many countries that is happening, in some countries not. So, Africa is a minimum of 50 countries, if not even more, because of different regions and so on. So it goes in certain areas up and in others down. And
definitely. Yeah. Now, if we look at the automotive aftermarket, Automechanika Johannesburg is playing a role to, I think, facilitate or becoming a platform for the automotive aftermarket. Now that you have been here a few years and you are leading this show, how do you see that Automechanika Johannesburg is playing a role in this segment?
Yeah, so we finished yesterday. So obviously, I can tell you very fresh that we are playing a very big role, especially in connecting the international market to the African markets. We had visitors from 47 countries,
wow,
out of which 22 African countries. So you can see directly from those numbers what a diversity there is on the visitor side, on the buyer side. And I think I mentioned to you earlier that we also went on a roadshow to 6 African countries. And it was really funny because I walked through the exhibition and every now and then somebody said, "Oh, hey, I met you in Zambia," or "I saw you in Nigeria at the roadshow." And so it's great to see that those people actually attend. I didn't expect anything else, but then when it really happens, it really makes you happy. It is flattering, absolutely. So if you just think of even traveling to 3 African countries, the cost and the time involved in that is astronomical compared to attending a show, having a little stand, and meeting all these people that you would have to spend weeks and lots of money if you had to travel and visit them directly. The ROI on this show, for example, works on very small numbers. And that's why I'm very confidently saying that we do influence the African aftermarket trade a lot, and we are a great entry point for that.
Michael, it's really lovely to have you here. I think we can go on in this conversation forever.
Episode 3 and 4.
Yeah. We will love to see you both in, Automechanika Dubai, Johannesburg, Frankfurt. We always are in touch. Yeah. Thank you for your time. It's always good to have a discussion. Any last words?
If you allow me to elaborate just a little more on our roadshow, because sure. I feel now that the show is over, I feel like this is actually, I didn't realize how big and how interesting this is for companies. And we've started now for the next year. We want to go again to 6 countries, different ones than this year.
Take me with you.
100%. And that's what I want to say. I want to say that we have started speaking to our exhibitors if they wanted to either join in on the roadshow or send a representative
or sponsoring
or sponsor it. Exactly. Well, that's the whole point. And then if you think about it, you're not only going to be at the show next year, but you're also going to be around. You have several contact points with several important markets during the year. So I think actually, that's I didn't realize that this could be very interesting for many companies, because we take away that pain of going into these uncertainties, into uncertain markets and so on.
Interesting.
So that's what I just wanted to mention right at the end.
No, I think we have been in the past in some of your road shows, and I think to really connect deeper with customers, sometimes only in the first visit it's different, but when you connect through, if it's a road show, through a visit, and then you see them in the exhibition, then the collaboration, then the possibility of really doing some business comes in a different level, because now you know the customer, and then the trust. You know, Africa is all about trust. If they trust you, they do business with you. If they don't trust you, you're never going to get any business.
And you know, despite all the e-commerce and despite all the digitalization and so on, it's also same in the Middle East. You know, you know a person, you shook his hand, you looked into their eyes, and you had a chat with them. After that, it's much easier to start doing business. And in Africa, it's just the same thing, and everything is heavily relying on relationships. And at the end of the day, you know, our company is all about meeting in person.
True.
We never went onto the virtual track, and I'm sure nobody really enjoys that. It's sometimes practical, but it's never really.
It's never really the same.
It's never the same, exactly.
And I think as a human in general, we like to meet each other. And we like to, we flourish that way. And it was a time that we had to use digital solutions, but I think it's not the preferred way of meeting or doing business or celebrating birthday or, you know.
No.
So I think it was a time, now it's over with the time of COVID and the digitalization. I mean, they're tools, we're still using them, but I think meeting a person face-to-face cannot be replaced with an email or a phone call or an online meeting.
And something that I realize as well now that I'm in this industry for more than 20 years, 25 years.
2 decades.
More than that, yes. And I'm sure you are as well. I feel like at exhibitions you meet your professional family, right?
Yeah.
Over the years you go to Vegas, you go to Frankfurt, you go to Shanghai, Dubai, whatever. And you never really make appointment with that person, but when you bump into that person, you think, oh my God, we go way back, and so on. It is always it's like a professional family meeting that brings people together, and some very big business relationships, they start by coincidence at an exhibition. If I may close with this.
Go ahead.
In Dar es Salaam, on the way to the airport, we had a little bit of time. We passed by a company and it looked really big and it looked impressive. We'd never heard of it before. So we decided to just pull in and say hello, right? And we were surprised to hear that the CEO of the company, when he heard that we were there, again, we had no appointment, he wanted to see us. And we were a little bit surprised because that's not normal, that you walk in and you meet the boss right away. Yeah. And he said, the reason why I wanted to see you is because everything that is here started in 1976 by a pure coincidence at Automechanika, where I bumped into a person and I made a deal with them. They were my German suppliers, and my entire business is based on that one meeting.
Beautiful.
And he gave us a presentation on his company, and we are talking multi-billion-dollar company today.
Nice.
So,
these
are the seeds we plant.
Yes, right? Definitely. Michael, thank you very much. It was really lovely having you. We carry on this discussion offline.
Sure.
For our audience, here we wrap up another episode of Wiki Bearings. If you have any comments or suggestion, email us at podcast@mcb.ae. Keep spinning towards success. And that wraps another episode of Wiki Bearings. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the fascinating realm of the engineering innovation. Until next time, keep spinning towards greatness.